Alright folks, Austin again. We'll go through the first few turns of the Spectacle of Perspicuity game. I've showed my kind of nation overview design. I've talked about the different units in the nation and kind of how I intend to use them. Now I'm going to go through the first, we'll see how things are going in the first few turns of the game. It does occur to me one thing I haven't talked about a whole lot is my overall strategy really. And I should probably mention, the sort of fundamental idea is that Helheim is a good raiding nation. Almost all the units are stealthy. The Vanjarls, as I mentioned earlier, are outstanding raiders. There may be better ones. I can think of a couple that might be better, but for cost and versatility and everything, they're awfully good, especially for recruit anywhere. But they are a little costly, I suppose. So my real strategy in this game, and it's going to be skewed a little bit because of two things. One is the easy research, as I mentioned in my nation design. Video has a little bit of an odd effect on some parts of the game. Also, somebody mentioned in one of the comment sections that they were, hoping to see Blood Nation, and Helheim's a pretty decent Blood Nation. It's certainly not like Miquelin or one of the real hardcore Blood Nations, but it's pretty good. So I'm actually going to skew a little bit towards Blood. And that also actually did factor a little bit in. I don't think I mentioned it, but it did factor a little bit in on my nation design and not going more for money scales. So the idea is sort of that I'll try to build up a blood economy and then use the blood economy to kind of account for the fact that I might be a little bit strapped on money. So lots of my units will be, summoned through either blood magic or through some other means, but primarily, I guess, blood magic. So the fact I'll be trying to use blood as one of my kind of currencies instead of gold will be a little bit of a skewing factor in my overall approach. The early turns, however, aren't going to play out too wacky, really. I'm going to try to expand, obviously, as quickly as I can. My pretender is going to stay home to do research. Helheim is a very good nation. Expansion is very, very easy. I'll be using, and I will actually, it's funny, I think in the earlier video about kind of with the nation overview, I talked about the like the Hellcarls and how I don't really use those. I do end up using a couple of them, kind of just in the early expansion. One, because, really just because they're fairly cheap and I don't have the type of gold I need to buy some of the Hangedrots, and the Vanjarls I can recruit anywhere, and I don't know, I just the Hellcar is a little bit cheaper, so I'll be using those a little bit on my expansion. So to start out, this is turn one, and let's look. And I guess I should also mention as one sort of last prelude of sorts, as I've seen Maryland's videos, he's taken a little bit different tack, I think, on the way he approaches some things than I do. So maybe it'll become evident if you watch both sets of videos. But I'm going to try to, I don't know if I want to say avoid talking about the same sorts of things he does, but I want to talk about maybe some different sorts of things. So what I do want to do is take a quick look at the map here and just get an overall idea of where everything lays out. As I pull all the way out, this is a wraparound map, so this is pretty much the whole world here. I think I can get it if I hide my UI and get a little bit better. So here's pretty much the whole world to be seen now. The things that are of really interest to us in our part of the world are that we're kind of in this odd coastal setting here. This wasteland is very, very interesting to us. In Maryland, it's funny, I did notice in his video, I think it was this wasteland over here he targeted, and he's very keen on. The reason for that, and for me, and I'm sure for him also, is you need wasteland to cast Hidden in Sand, and I really like to cast it, and I think he's the one that, got me turned on to it in the first place. And so having that wasteland right there is really exciting. I will often, early on in the game, and even before the game sometimes, try to assess how many wastelands there are on the map and how likely I think I am to get one and that sort of thing, to try to sort of figure out how viable that spell will be, so I can figure it into my plans a little bit. So that's very good and exciting. We're on the coast. That's normally pretty interesting. Since Maryland's playing a water nation, it'll probably be pretty hard to get in the water and stay in the water. Normally I'm really big on trying to expand in the water, but in this game it's probably going to be difficult at best and probably almost certainly not worth it. So probably won't worry about trying to get in the water, although normally I really do worry about trying to get in the water, especially if there's not a native water power in the game. Other things worth noting at this point in the game that I kind of want to usually look at are sort of what's around me, what kind of choke points, things like this do I have. You know, a typical map, you get about 15 provinces per nation is the math. On this one, it's actually, because it's a little bit bigger map, I believe it's figured out it's, I think, 77 provinces maybe, and a sort of low number of land provinces. So there's really about 20 provinces per land nation, a little bit more, even 21, 22 or so provinces per land nation that you can sort of factor on this. And I didn't really do that in my original planning. I didn't really factor for the 22, you know, sort of provinces, or 20 or whatever that number was that would be available. Normally, if you're thinking about 15, you'd start to look at things like, okay, well, this is a real significant, and I always press the 8 button, numeral 8, to show the difference, show the adjoining paths, because it can be pretty enlightening, and sometimes things don't connect the way you think. So I kind of like this province right here, number 21. It's a nice choke point in between these mountains. I definitely want to get both of these over here. This one also, if you notice, is a farmland. So it's high income, low resources. Basically, the high income part is because it's high population. In addition to low resources in terms of, you know, building things, which isn't usually a problem in Dominions, outside of a few nations. The other thing is it's also low magic, usually, which, by the way, wastelands usually have unusually high percentages of magic sites. So it'd be lovely to try to get it here to 21. That's probably needs to be an early goal. The waste, as much as I like it and everything, and I'll zoom in a little bit now, the wasteland here, as much as I like it, is not really that critical to take early, just because it's right next to our capital, and, you know, it's unlikely anybody's going to be able to really get in there without, and certainly expect to keep it without you know, starting a scrap. You know, beyond that, you kind of go, well, there's some kind of interesting choke points over here, quite a few of them, but those start to get a little bit far away. You know, and beyond that, even there's a bridge here that's certainly kind of an interesting choke point. This province right here in particular is a pretty good choke point also, and it'd be nice to get that, but that's sure a long ways away. So I don't know that seems terribly likely. As we look to the south, similarly, we see some interesting kind of choke points. That's an interesting province. You know, and here, sort of interesting provinces as far as choke points. And so these are the sorts of places we'd like to think about expanding. But again, it's sort of a long ways over there. And then the coast itself, you know, it's kind of a wide open area without a lot of choke points. But if you were to somehow be able to manage to get up here and then kind of get this over here, then you know, you would pretty easily have that whole coast, with the exception that Maryland's folks might come slithering up out of the water and grab one of those lands. One other feature on this map that's a little bit unusual, and it's not close to me, and I don't think it's really needs to be part of the planning at this point. There is a port here. So if you notice these little anchors, some of the maps will have those that will, they're basically, they connect two land provinces, so units can actually move from here, and that's just one of the reasons why you turn on the little 8 to show your movement paths. So it shows you can actually move from this province to this province over here. So that can be pretty powerful if you can get on both sides of that. But I have no easy, quick routes to get there. So overall, I don't love my starting position. You know, I like that it's next to the waste. I'm hopeful I can get this choke point over here, but these others, you know, choke points seem awfully far off, and same down here. As it turns out, tell ahead a little bit, I did actually have a very robust expansion. I did actually kind of get all these choke points, but that's really partially because of the kind of high provinces per player on the map, and also partially maybe some of the other folks had a little bit slower expansion than usual. But so I was actually able to get out there and get those. but normally you wouldn't count on it. And at the point where I got this, I was, trying to figure out, well, I can kind of hunker in right here, but then how do I really try to go? I think my initial thought was to get this kind of choke point up here, maybe as a top priority, and then maybe try to get like right in here to kind of stem some of this. I really didn't think it was reasonable to think I'd be able to get over here or up here or anything like that. So that was my initial take on the game itself. Turn one, which is this turn, was really pretty straightforward. My recruitment, as we've seen, I got a Hell Carl, I got a couple of these Hell Herdings, and some of the what they call Huskarls that I mentioned earlier. I like the ones with the spears. So that's my initial recruitment. My initial army, I got some of the Huskarls that I like the spears. That's good news. I got some of these Surf Warriors that I don't really have, as I mentioned also before, I don't have a whole lot of use for, but they're fine as some early fodder. And I've got a Hell Carl that I can use for expansion. And then I've got the usual Scout, plus obviously my Pretenders up and running, because I took the Awake Pretender. So turn one, my Pretender's researching. And since this is easy magic, it only takes 20 points for the first item, I'm starting an alteration. That's probably not entirely necessary. And in fact, as I played the game out, it really wasn't. The notion was, though, to get Mist Form as quickly as possible. Primarily so that if I got some Vanjarls up and running, they would be able to essentially, starting about turn 3 or 4, they'd be able to cast Mist Form and Blessing, and at that point they could even route Indies. As it turns out, the way the game progressed, I didn't really end up recruiting when we're doing that, but that was the notion, to try to keep my early recruitment down, was to try to use Vanjarls to do some of my early expansion. It turned out it wasn't necessary, and I didn't end up doing it, but that's why I started an alteration. My Pretender gives me 34 points. My starting troops, it's kind of the normal bit. Taxes to 140. I could probably have gone 150, but I don't like to get it. I like to be very sure that I'm going to be able to control down to 0. It's worth mentioning some nations are better than that than others. So if you're playing whatever nation you're playing, you got to kind of figure out for your nation how well your starting troops are able to control the initial unrest. I started that tax at 140. My starting commander, gave him the troops. He's patrolling. My scout becomes prophet. My researching Pretender, doing research. This is all pretty standard stuff here. And that's really all that's happening on turn one. Like I said, I spent some fair bit of time looking at the map and talking about kind of my initial goals and thoughts and where I wanted to head first. And I guess a little bit about my initial research. I probably should talk about that more, but I'll maybe touch on that as it changes a little bit. It's not the research that I normally do in a normal game, by the way. I normally wouldn't do that alteration, but because of the easy magic research and the Awake Pretender that can knock out the Mist Form so quick, like I say, my thought was that I might use some Vanjarls or even Hangedrots, the 340 gold guys, to do some initial expansion with, but I really didn't. But that was the thought for it. Normally I'd actually probably go Thom or Conjuration first. Anyway, so that's the first turn, and I'm going to go ahead and exit out of that for the time being. And I'm going to go ahead and cut this video, I don't want to say short, because probably none of them will actually be short, but I'm going to go ahead and just do the one turn, even though it's the least interesting turn ever, since I've burned a lot of time talking about the other things. And the next few turns I hope to go through quicker. We'll see.